And welcome to an exciting episode of Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and tonight I have with us a very amazing guest. I have worked with him, and I am so thrilled to be able to allow him to share his story and his experiences with you all here. So I'm going to turn it over to my guests to introduce themselves because after reading his bio, I could no way do it justice. So I am going to turn it over to the one, the amazing, the wizard of the information waves, Stephen Popiotek.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Michael. You're so funny.
You're,
That's a good
you're
introduction.
welcome.
It's a pleasure to be
Well
on the show here.
deserved.
Get our premier fun broadcast with you today.
Yes, I've been looking forward to it. And for people who may not be familiar for some reason, maybe new to the field, could you give a little bit of your background and what you do?
Sure, definitely. Um, I originally, let's see. I basically kind of call myself a cosmic shaman. This is one of the terms, but a metaphysical teacher, lecturer. I do different conferences as well. Usually here in New York at the new Life Expo every year. I'm usually on the UFO panel and also giving my own lectures and usually on topics around like extraterrestrial influences and humanities affairs is one of my favorite topics I like to talk about a lot. Although I come from like a Kabbalistic background and Egyptian mysticism background originally, started meditating in my late teens, 16, 17, 18, had a lot of early Kundalini activations, spiritual awakening processes early on. It's like a long time ago, but that kind of set my course in motion there, along with sun gazing, remembering how to look into the sun when I was 21 back in the early 90s as well. Then during my first metaphysical workshop, which I taught upstate New York back in 96, 97, that opened up the Pandora's box to part of the conversation we'll probably go into in terms of like military induction programs and being taken up there, which was pretty early on. But fast forwarding that, also doing like group meditations from new moon, full moons, different types of grid work to help the planet evolve and clear out more of the negative structures that are going on by the negative extraterrestrial groups and other organizations that try to limit our consciousness. So part of my work is about trying to delimit consciousness so we can, properly ascend through these orbitals, like greater love awareness states, greater unity awareness states, greater connections to our cosmic ancestry. So for me, I work a lot with star people that are aware of, at least a little bit aware of their lineage off-world, incarnation-wise, before they came here. So I like to help people connect more to their galactic medicine wheel idea in terms of whether they're Pleiadian, Andromedan, Orion. There's a lot of different lineages we have here of star people. So that's one branch, that I do a lot of work on helping clients clear out negative blockages, both in this life, other lifetimes as well. And have a niche of clients that are more in the category of what we work with in my lab as a speak community as well. We go deeper dives into all sorts of crazy stuff. And I've also met people in that community that remember me and I remember them from some of the programs as well. So it does get more interesting, intense, and triggering, and full of drama sometimes. But it's if we get back to our center, it can all be really good.
Exactly. And you mentioned one thing that I haven't really heard a lot of people mention, and that is sun gazing.
Mm.
What I'm like picturing you're just blindly staring at the sun, but I feel like there's more to it.
Yeah, yeah. That would probably hurt if I did just without any intention or preparation. I mean, also the sun has shifted though too. Not just on an energetic level, but because I was doing it for so many years, I could tell different spectrums coming from the sun from when I first started doing sun gazing in the early 90s compared to now. The sun is definitely in a different state of emissions. Let's put it that way. I mean, they had shown me that there were that the sun that was actually shifting. It was probably late 90s, early 2000s. It was shifted more into helium and carbon fusion, not just the hydrogen fusion, which the scientists only fix it upon, but there's other things going on in all stars that are far beyond what we normally are taught about stars. And so for me, the sun gazing started more as an impetus to reconnect to a feeling of a memory I first had about being involved in different solar cultures in certain past lives, like with the Inca Indians and the Egyptians, the Mayans. And it was a calling that was so deep in my heart, from the voice and the guides were giving me to really reactivate this powerful part of yourself that's been laying dormant. And I didn't know what to expect either at first, other than just like, okay, I need to make sure that I invoke extra protection from my field and from my eyes, because I don't want to go blind, of course, And I wasn't doing it in the early morning, or so I was doing it it was about to be about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, in the warm season, so the sun was still out for quite some time. I basically just was pulled to play some chakra music and get on my heart center and bring more love energy up into my field and visualize kind of like a golden solar light orb around my field, and called the angels as I normally do from each direction, and then just trust and like open my eyes and like just literally it felt like being like as if I was jumping off a cliff energetically and was going to surrender to this like light of God that I really thought was coming through the sun, that we've been so conditioned to block out, and there have been so many cultures talking about this power of divinity that comes to our sun. So it's like they all can't be wrong. There's something there, aside from just a basic metaphor of like, of course, people are living because of sunlight, and it's a electromagnetic field and gravity fields. So when I did that, the energy was really hardcore. The Kundalini, I was getting like electric shocks in my body. It felt like I was going through like a chaotic storm at first to try to like lock in kind of like a resonant space with the sun. It's almost like a smaller parallel would be like looking into the eyes of like your greatest lover, but at first you're meeting each other, it can be intense, but there's also like pushing, shyness or like issues come up, and you're kind of finding that right space to just sink into each other's field and like feel that rapport and that connection where you're kind of brought into like a more like a space of timelessness, just like you would with someone that you really care about, and you do sense maybe sometimes where you are, timing, and it's just you're encompassing each other's field of loving connection that you feel with that person, right? So it's a similar idea, though it's a little more transpersonal, right? Because it's not a person, but some idea at a certain point it clicks in, and I felt like as if I had like a waveguide tube to just like anchor to my field, and like I clicked in. And when that click in feeling occurred, everything became like timeless and like just like super peaceful, super quiet, and then my eyes could focus more without feeling like it was getting hurt because of the intensity. I was like it just like locked in. And then I felt this incredible waves of love coming through that corridor from the sun, which obviously is like exists on many levels: electromagnetic, magnetic, multidimensional. And then I saw these tall golden light beings just like stream down through that corridor towards me. I'm like, holy shit, who's this? Who are these beings? Because I already had felt different experiences with angels and then visitations from also on the dark side, early on getting attacks really early. So I learned very quickly about the different parameters of a wide range of beings, both inner plane as well as on the external level. Anyway, so these tall golden solar beings came down. They were like bald, made of golden light, very beautiful, angelic looking faces, and but androgynous kind of look. And they had these mini suns as their heart chakra, mini golden orbs. And I was like, oh my God, they came down to just like swarmed around me and held me. And I started crying. I fell to the ground. Like the energy was so overwhelming. It felt like my own like biblical moment of like, oh my God, like this is literally like these God beings, and but they were also so familiar to me, and they were like, you are home now. And they said that they called themselves the Golden Solar League of the Solar Legions, Golden Solar League of the Solar Legions. And they said that every star is inhabited by these multidimensional beings, and that they had a form. They at one point in their history they were in forms like humans in 3-dimensional bodies, and they incarnated up the cycles of evolution. So they got to their 6th, 7th dimensional planes of existence in which they could then reside on a star body or in a star consciousness space. And they said that I was one of them, but just in a body this time. That they kind of referred to those of us who had that lineage with them as like solar terrestrial legions, basically. And so there's still expands the categories, not just like having Andromeda lifetimes or Pleiadian lifetimes on planets, but it kind of rose the bar for my perceptual awareness to be like, oh my God, of course, how can the most magnificent spheres of light and love that are giving birth to light and life not have consciousness on it, right? So it's almost like the inverted. We've all been taught the inversion of truth so many times, and so anyway, that opened up the whole space, that also opened the space for my first engagements with some of the getting on the radar of some of the shadowy groups with the black helicopters, because they started coming over when I started first doing that, and that opened up more like a negative attention side that led to much deeper shadowy rabbit holes later on.
I could imagine. I'm kind of curious with looking at the sun. There seems to be a Mandela effect around the sun, because there are people that'll say the sun used to be white, now it's orange, or it was yellow, now it's orange, or it was yellow, now it's white. So why? So I'm curious. Have you noticed that? And secondly, part would be is why do you think the shift in color? Is it natural, or did we do something that caused a change?
I would say combination, the second part. As I mentioned earlier, there definitely was a shift that went on, because I wasn't able to, well, a lot of things happened since the early 90s for me, and late 90s. Because when I went through my my military induction, we also were trying to interfere with my connection to some of my sources of power, which included the sun. So they had to remember on my field to try to misalign me, so it would take me years to get back into that alignment that I previously had. But I was so, in terms of my ability to do some of the longer meditations, because back then I was doing like an hour long looking at the sun. The longest I did was in the 90s, like an hour and a half straight. Like that's hardcore. Just a few minutes now, I'm okay. But the intensity of the sun's rays have become more intense in some ways. Let's put it that way. But also color shifts or differences of opinion, I think, have more to do with the change in the spectrum of the bandwidth of energy coming from the sun due to the shifting of the fusion process. And I did find some articles several years ago where scientists have found some more proof, at least the mainstream was like, oh yeah, we are finding more proof that there is actually some carbon and helium fusion going on in some parts of the sun that surprised them. And also even articles where they were talking about how they were shocked in the past couple of years, where they discovered huge, really powerful gamma rays are being also created by the sun that they did not theorize even were possible being generated by the sun on a regular basis. And since the 90s, the guys would tell me that, part of the energy we're trying to channel on the spiritual level is to harness the spiritual power of gamma rays, because gamma rays affect our DNA, they affect our atoms. It's not just a negative way that you have from radiation experiments and nuclear problems and nuclear reactors, but natural sources of gamma radiation in the right quantity and the right preparation of the body can help your DNA shift and help you evolve your consciousness on a whole different level. So that's more like solar mysticism kind of teachings. So I think the color was definitely due to spectral differences, but also the freaking chemtrails and the different sprays and different dark grids of the assholes that we have put around the earth, both human and non-human, have been a huge campaign to try to disconnect the children of the sun from their divine parent energies, let's put it that way, and creating this separation and the worship of the transfer of true parentage of divine mother, father from the sun, replacing it with the false light of the fluorescent light bulbs, and getting people stuck into the digital, overly emphasized realm of manipulated light that oftentimes is not the right frequencies that you need for your health, obviously. So, get people more trapped inside, and then when they're outside, you get them more sprayed up. So like barium, which is one of the common chemtrail ingredients. One of the lesser known facts about barium is that it has the highest solar radiation absorption rate out of all the elements. So it's literally, and it's also used in some of the more advanced alternative electromagnetic weapon systems, right? They call scalar fields or like longitudinal weapon systems, where barium is form of barium mixed with titanium, barium titanate, is a special element that they actually use it in some ceramics, but it's used in the covert military weapon systems, because it has the ability to create what they call phase conjugate waves, which are like a unique kind of feedback loop of a bandwidth of electromagnetism, where that energy is bouncing back and forth like a mirror, but it's a perfect mirror only in the direction of the actual emanation, reflecting right back to itself. Just like instead of a regular mirror, we can see it in different angles, someone in it. This is like just a straight line, and like, they would use some of those elements, for example. Normally, like they found like lasers, that like they call it a four-wave optical mixing, where they use different lasers and crystals to create a similar effect for some of their like tracking systems of high-speed missiles with the radar. where they would also use some of the high speed, using like the special like light beams that were created, where the laser beam will bounce off the target back to the device, and it goes back and forth, obviously very fast, but it keeps its lock on the actual target. And part of that, they call it, it's like a phase conjugate system, where it's a time reverse wave, or the reflection wave is in lock and step with the original wave. So like the wave front, the crest and the trows of the wave are lined up perfectly, and it cuts through friction, cuts through normal diffusion in the atmosphere, say from clouds and stuff like that. So they can create that phase conjugate effect with many different bandwidths, and vary and tighten as a unique element, and that they describe it, what's the term, we call it a self-pumped phase conjugate system. So it has a very unique ability to generate this type of reflective wave and lock-in capacity. So when you think about that, and the fact that they're spraying that all around, and you think about like scalar wave weapon systems and how they would modify radar systems, to project, say, microwave streams, and then they can found that when they have those microwave beams hit each other just the right angle, to where they cancel each other out, they release, like Tom Bearden talks a lot about that stuff, releasing the scalar wave energy, or this tension on the nuclear level that gets transferred from the normal transverse wave that all the normal electromagnetism is about into this scalar field. This is going to hold a side conversation, but I was expecting to talk about this part. But it is fascinating because, one thing else I theorize, because they spray so much barium, and they also, if you notice in a lot of the food, there's so many, one of the, I'm not sure if it's preservative or it's a dye, but you'll find what is it? It's like a titanate. It's a simple chemical element there, but there's an ingredient in certain foods where they have titanium in it as like a preservative type thing. And so I'm like, well, if we're getting that from so many of these different preservatives and foods, and they're spraying barium, well, it's probably creating barium titanate inside our own bodies, which they're literally making us into the antenna system for those scalar systems to like lock into our fields even more efficiently, right? And that's like before all the advanced nanotech stuff we're talking about and things like that. This is more basic stuff, but when people understand that this has been going on for so long, and they've really been trying to engineer our ability to connect to reality authentically, right, and limit our ability to tap into certain bandwidths of reality, and beings that exist in those bandwidths. And then we start to understand, how much of this of the crap show we're living in, and it goes back to the sun, trying to limit our ability to receive, the Creator's love and light that's meant to help us in our transformation, in our ascension process, in our evolution process, and that's the main thing, really. It's been a theme going on for millennia, though. All these dark extraterrestrial groups, worship their concept of black sun, and these black sun orders and black sun groups that try to create the opposite of a positive sun energy,
right, and
instead of giving you light.
Which actually leads to a good question that Kitsley Hell has, and she says, is it possible to detox this, or is the body, or is it in the body forever now?
Oh no, it's definitely, yeah. I mean, when I researched, I heard that manganese, the element that mineral, helps get rid of barium from the body. Same way that like magnesium helps get rid of aluminum from the body, because some of the receptor points in the cells will pull it out. I've also heard people using, what is that one called? It's like it's another combination of zeolite that people take to also detoxify certain chemicals in the body. But simply, like the manganese is one of the manganese has many positive benefits in the body as well. And and even like chlorella, I'd also recommend in general, just to get rid of any heavy metal detox, type of nutritional formulas would be helpful, in general, for sure, especially these days with all the crap we see flying. Not to mention if people have gotten the job, that's a whole other level of it, right? So, that's a whole other story. And seaweed too, and like moss, I've heard that a lot of those types of ingredients are good for the body, cleaning out different elements.
Yeah. Thank you. And Kitsley Hell has another question for you, and I want to piggyback another part to that. And she says, do you think the sun is fake now? She's seen videos to this effect, and my part that I'd add to it is, because we now understand the sun is a gate, like you can traverse worlds through it, to dimensions or other things. Is that why we're seeing the sun differently as well?
Well, our relationship to the sun is definitely changing in terms of, because Gaia's relationship with the sun, because Gaia, Mother Earth, is alive, and she's not just a ball of chemicals. It's like, so since we're dealing with so much sentient levels of consciousness, not just in the limited scale as in the human body or soul or in a plant or animal, but on much larger scales. The school, the environment of Gaia and the planet Earth is shifting to evolve as well into more of a heart-centered space, more divine love space, which is what so much of these negative groups are trying to interfere with, is not just our own personal ascension, but Gaia's shifting of her inner plasma core, inner magnetic core, with the magnetic fields that have been shifting, a lot around the Earth. The shifting magnetic poles also are part of like the dissolving of the veil of separation between dimensions and timelines. But of course, these idiots in power keep trying to manipulate the magnetic fields locally and collectively to try to connect us to negative timelines, and trying to use people as anchor points to bring in these darker alien invasion timelines, which is a big one that they keep trying to link up, that I see with clients daily, are being plugged into these systems at different bases, alien bases, military bases that are hosting that technology. But also larger kind of terraforming attempts by the negative ET groups to manipulate some of the environmental aspects of the Earth to make it more suitable for to make it more coupled with elements from their negative worlds that are on a dark ascension path. So there's a lot of things that have come in to create this like veil enhancement instead of the veil decreasing. So there also are a lot of these secret time bureaus, secret time agencies that are also involved with the negative ET groups that are being run out of different defense contractors that are also trying to manipulate people's connection to time on a quantum level, and also create structures around the Earth to limit our ability to properly calibrate to Gaia's shifting electric fields, magnetic fields, so that we're not properly stabilizing in the new Earth frequencies that are coming up to help us shift, right? So all that does have an effect on perception. And so and also where you are makes a big difference. I've seen videos and friends traveling to those cities where the sun does look to me like, what the hell's going on there? It looks, it's a lot dimmer, or it looks off compared to other places. But if I'm in the tropical area, not just the normal tropics because of the angle, or even in New York, I've seen it, but I definitely see it more clearly when it's the actual blue sky and there's not any chemtrails in it. The sun does stand out in a better, authentic way. And so I would say, I haven't seen the videos that this person was talking about in terms of fake sun, but I would say if that would be more like a localized phenomena if they're messing really hardcore with the negative grids they're putting in the air, or around that part of the Earth. It wouldn't surprise me if they're trying to, create some false light version of it, but I don't give them that much power to create that on a scale that planetary wise. I would say maybe localized under certain conditions. And then also what you said too, the sun, and as all stars are portals. It really is like, I first looked in the sun back then, the guides had shown me that, it was like the stars are like the neurons in the mind of God, and it was like this neural network on a galactic level. And and you hear that phrase coming out, astronomers past several years about the cosmic web that connects galaxies and different systems together, and these huge filaments of plasma and other energies, or what they realize as dark matter, dark energy. But it's really higher dimensional energy that's also involved in our movement and our coupling. And so, the center of certain stars do have hyperdimensional portals that link out to other stars. So there would be practices I used to do early on where we would go through layers of the sun and energetically with different beings that are there to help us step up our vibrations, so that we could, say, call upon the Pleiadian energies of Alcyone and have it more perceivable by doing a sun meditation and calling in that star energy, and have our sun be a kind of like a zoom in, zoom out, kind of idea where you can call in the, say, Pleiadian energies that come through our sun, because it is normally anyway, but we're not aware of that, and then have that kind of energy be magnified in your field. So it's a little bit of a more advanced shamanic kind of tool of like navigating holographically our relationship to a larger wholeness that we are part of, right? So, and the star bodies and stars can act as a great catalyst to help us evolve. But we have to evolve our capacity to hold that much more light and love, and electrically speaking, magnetically speaking. So again, this is the reason why they keep trying to limit us, people from the COVID times and the different big pharma things that are going on to toxify people's bodies on top of the GMOs and the stuff being sprayed. It's it's a lot of it's engineered to not just creating a controllable population, but a disconnected population, so that people are not in their heart center, they're more divided, more less trusting of nature, spending less time in nature, more conflict, more division, you know, and creating artificial veils that do block out some of the natural thinning of the veil that is taking place, so that they're upset because we're going to be seeing, you know, when as the veil gets more thinner, it's like being able to see not just aliens but spirits, other phenomena that are occurring on the inner planes, people's third eye opening up more naturally because of that frequency acceleration. So they're trying to create more of the digital overlay and all not just 5G antennas, but other types of systems with their broadcasting to create, you know, kind of like their version of like virtual reality, but on the inner planes, where they want to create like an astral cyber overlay to reality, so that we're engaging less with authentic reality and more with this false light kind of grid that's connected a lot to the alien AI energies that are also part of, and also advanced tech that some of our agencies are using. They were trying to trap me there a few times. I've been years ago when I saw in the dream plane, because they also experiment some of these agencies and CIA, you know, was working with other groups and NSA, and they in certain corporations, and they made this artificial layer on the inner planes that we're trying to trap people in these pockets of like astral cyber realms, you know, that would be actually partly made by people's energies that were being harnessed as like pixels in that background simulation layer of the astral plane. And it's so hyper realistic. I mean, they have it down really. I mean, it's very difficult to tell the difference between when you're in that space. And I was quite impressed by it the first time I got into that realm. I was like, oh wow. But then I got out of it in that part of the system by actually trying to see the sun while I was in that astral cyber realm and doing a sun meditation and meditating and being like, I'm not going to get, you can't replicate the true sun in this fake astral cyber realm, so I'm going to exit out of your little fake reality domain. And I was calling on other guys out in protection, and funny enough, one of my really psychic close friends messaged me the next day, and she goes, oh, I got your call last night. You probably were stuck in some weird holographic realm on the inner planes. I was like, exactly, but I didn't realize she was one also helped me to get out of it. But you see these confirmations when you find like souls and people that are part of your soul family, and you can help each other kind of, help each other many different ways. This was a more very precise way, but I started seeing that happening with some clients where they were trying to trap, certain people's fields in those realms as well. Again, they're trying to pull out all these different toolkits to see how they can slow down or trap people in the lower matrix of vibration that's disconnected from the heart. And because they also are aware that all these love energies are coming in, not just from changes that are happening in the sun, Earth's magnetic field, and this local gas cloud plasma that our whole solar system is immersed in now, changes in the galactic center. So there's a lot of astronomical phenomena occurring simultaneously that's vectoring in to help us graduate into this new school, so to speak. And the positive ET groups are really waiting for us, wanting to help us out more. So there are massive shifts going to happen later this year that are part of this first big wave coming up from Gaia's core that I can talk about in a little bit too. That's really important. But I feel like I'm going into the little spin fields. Maybe I'll pause for a minute, let you digest, or see if you want.
No, and while you're taking a second, I remember it was like probably maybe a decade ago that they showed a photo of the sun and like 5 little ships that looked like they were coming out of the sun. And I wish I had saved that photo because I never imagined, because it seemed like a mainstream source, that it would disappear and nobody would ever talk about it again. And as we're talking about the sun, it makes me wonder, because that's not the only celestial body that influences us.
Sure.
What's your thoughts about the moon? Is it real, or is it part of another planet that broke off and got stuck in our world perfectly, or is it a space station?
Yeah, I would say all of that. But going back to the first thing you mentioned, I remember seeing those videos too, and that was, there's been a lot of cool shots and news, even from the mainstream like Soho transmitters, of seeing these other ship-like giant things around the sun. And that's exactly what we're talking about. The higher dimensional ships that are like fifth dimensional and above can use stars as a transit system to commute and use that wormhole hyperdimensional connectivity to really phase in one star system through another through regions of that local star body. So there is a bigger kind of variety of transport systems that use these other levels of hyperspace and energies that are not so tangible to us in the 3D realm necessarily. Although we have obviously SSP programs that have their own abilities to travel through artificial wormholes and different stargates, time gates. But there's different as you go up the dimensions. There's obviously different relationships the beings have to creation and the creator realms and their own ability to evolve and influence and use their local environment as a tailor-made reflection of their consciousness. The living light ships as opposed to just physical metal ships or or organic interface ships. Or they create these thought forms that are like advanced versions like a Merkaba that actually can appear like a ship, and aside from like plasma orbs and things like that. So but the moon, the moon is definitely. I do group work. I've been pretty consistent for a lot of years because it's such a powerful doorway, and not just there's been different groups talking about again it's a lot of the divide and conquer methodology and programming goes on, right? Even all different communities, the spiritual community, conspiracy community, SSP community, and there are groups that go to extreme with it. We're like, oh, because it's they're saying that the moon is artificial, partially artificial, or a lot of dark things going on there. You shouldn't do any moon meditations or blah blah blah. And it's like, I'm like, well, no, it's exactly why you should, because we're going to be light workers to take back our power from all these objects. Otherwise, they're usually against us. If we're afraid of it, then that's something that they use to amplify their projection into us. And because the moon, a lunar body as an archetype, right? It does represent divine feminine, like ancient lunar cultures and ancient lunar priestesses, and many different temples around the world, honored this triple goddess energy of the moon, right? So in Wicca, magic, groups, Celtic groups, all different cultures have understood the power of this divine feminine symbol of the moon. But of course, things get exploited, things get distorted, things get inverted. When you're dealing with not just symbols, but bodies represent those symbols that have been partially co-opted, then of course you're going to have more discernment and more quality control filters to be called in, so that you're not getting influenced by the shadow aspect of what's going on from those realms. So the moon is a perfect example because everybody's in the moon. Well, so many different negativity bases on the moon, positivity bases in the moon, different SSP programs in the moon. So everyone's on. It's quite an active zone. And because it represents and connects as such powerful gravity energy over our water and the earth and our water element in our bodies and our feminine cycles of circadian rhythms being influenced and seasonal rhythms being influenced, and and there's a whole insertion into the body of time that's quite linked up in lunar calendars. Like today is Chinese New Year's, which represent it's always marked by the new moon in Aquarius, and it's a lunar calendar similar to the Jewish calendar. And so you have this honoring or understanding of lunar cycles in relationship to time, right? So it's a lot of layers there when you're dealing with the moon, and its ability to reflect light to us, but also deception to us, and because it is a doorway to the collective subconscious and our own personal emotional body. Of course, you're going to have stages or theaters of operation there that are going to be not so good as well, because they want to take advantage of that proximity and that relationship to our collective psyche and use it against us. But at the same time, there are positive groups that are trying to do the opposite. And Gaia doing the same thing, where she's evolving more of her energy field because her magnetic field goes out to the moon as well, to be able to help layers of the moon evolve. And they were showing me in a recent work when we were doing that energy and sending it to the moon, that as the Earth goes through those bigger shifts, like 2029, 2030 is a big time frame for me to keep showing. This year is a pivotal one for new energies coming out of the Earth's core. That's going to be first shooting out through several locations globally, and then it's kind of like the kickstarting of Gaia's inner plasma love turbine engine. It's like part of her inner sun is getting kicked up, plasma core, to send out these new pulses of energy to help her children evolve more. And there's already campaigns to try to manipulate that I'll talk about in a bit. But so what they were showing me the recent group work is that they were sending the energy going out from Gaia and positive ETs to the moon. They were saying that around 2031, 2032, they were going to be kicking out all the negative ETs would be kicked out of the moon. Just with Earth shifting into that new vibrational space, the moon is essential to be cleaned out of all those parasitic negative ET groups and technologies that have been messing with the gravity coming from the moon to the Earth and trying to distort signatures of signals coming in from other star systems through the moon to the Earth have also been messed with to try to make it harder for star people to properly evolve and receive the codings they need. So there's a lot of layers to this, but again, if you do the work during these powerful lunar doorways and full moons, you can also impact the collective psyche more if you're doing it in a good way. So that's why we try to do it for pumping the light signal and calling different different groups like Andromeda especially are very active in helping collective evolve, and Pleiadians as well are coming in more. So there are other alternative light grids that are being formed around the Earth. It's not just all the darkness that's going on, but this is that the dark groups are very efficient at trying to get their negative constructs in play. That the past couple of years, pretty much every group work I've done now during these moon cycles have turned into, like this negative grid deconstruction project. So we're like, oh my God, we get a break here. And, so it's intense.
Well, and what I find interesting is I didn't put together the correlation until you mentioned the moon being divine feminine. That when we first started, there were gods and goddesses. And the goddess symbol is the full moon with the two crescent moons. So it's like when you said the divine feminine, I was like, yeah, that really makes sense because the goddess is represented by the moon. But when they got rid of the goddess energy and got rid of the goddess and said only a god did everything, it's like a lot of people stopped paying attention to the moon.
Yep. It's so much programming on so many different scales. The same way, went from during the Industrial Revolution and getting people more into overly mechanized thinking and getting them out of touch with spirit and nature into more of just the mechanical way of perceiving reality and the reductionist level of interpreting reality. Then where the physical becomes more dominant than the non-physical as being the most important, kind of cornerstone of perception. That becomes the biggest, to me, Baphomet satanic kind of idea, because they really are trying to convert the pentagram or invert the energy of the five elements so that matter becomes more superior to spirit, and just always be the other way around. So on the magical level, they also try to use these occult symbols to imprison people, imprison consciousness, and limit it. And so they're helping it evolve and use matter as a beautiful platform for the five elements and nature as a way that exalts God's presence and divine Mother and Father's presence here. By honoring the local creator energy, which is Gaia, Mother, Father, Earth, and Geb in Egyptian. That's the reflection of the divine parentage is in our Earth. So if they disconnect us from that awareness, then they're already winning part of the game against us, because we're losing touch with our local reflection of our divine connection.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very clever psyops by many different organizations and over many religions and theaters of engagement over the centuries. So it's
And I actually have an interesting question for you. It, like you say, things pop in your mind and information starts. And as we're talking about, returning to nature and everything and bringing the goddess energy and divine feminine back, I can't help but wonder, we talk about disclosure, and for example, President Kennedy was, and I know this is a little getting on the controversy side, but I think was taken out because he was doing a lot to bring back the truth and everything. And
for sure.
do you feel like, because it wasn't really until Kennedy that people started paying attention to the moon, because he made that famous statement, we're going to the moon and we're going to do it in less than a decade. And there was like a real push to get to the moon, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my God, there's the moon. We're going to the moon. The moon is back in normal conversation and has been since. And so I can't help but start to wonder, it was like Kennedy trying to bring back something through that act.
That's a very interesting angle. I like that. That's a fascinating spin. I definitely would agree that he pissed off a lot of parties, and especially with MJ12 group and the UFO community, and trying to get rid of the CIA and wanting to declassify all that stuff was a huge reason why they wanted to take him out. I mean, he made enough enemies in all different sectors to make it pretty easy for them in that sense, unfortunately. But the UFO part, I think, and was a huge part of that. And then in dealing with the moon, obviously, because part of what we saw in the moon program, in the public moon landing, obviously, they weren't going to show us everything that was there because, they already had bases on the moon. Also, the aliens were already there, and they didn't want live feed from the astronauts to show us, the alien facilities. So they had to, stage part of the video footage from the indoor setting, that was done right here, as opposed to live feed coming in from the cameras. So it was a mixture of that was being presented. So you have that also becoming a conspiracy thing too, because people were like, "Oh, the whole moon landing was fake. We never landed on the moon." It's like, no. Footage we saw was edited and fake, but that didn't mean we didn't land on the moon, because we already had landed on the moon with the corporate secret space programs and earlier ones. That's why I go crazy sometimes with other communities that spun off from Flat Earth, where they try to deny all this technology. I'm like you guys were saying, we're so much more advanced than that. We have ships in other freaking star systems, and we've had time travel for so many decades. We've had so many more layers of technology, that are out there. Even stuff in the public record about electrogravitics and being tested by scientists in the 50s and 60s, and it's like understanding of our relationship to nature and the forces of nature have been evolved and classified so many times over, independent of the technology we've gotten from the aliens groups. Just our own brilliant scientists have also come up with ideas have been amazing that they've suppressed and classified, right? So disclosure has to involve some of that as well to be able to have this really powerful technology. We're so in the Star Trek realms already, but we're still being kept in this old Stone Age mentality, of lack and separation and energy dependency and fake fuel sources, and again, their competition, war economy, and it's all that division stuff, which is the antithesis of the divine feminine energy that goes back to the first question, and how they distort, different periods they'll distort that feminine energy. One of the biggest things for me was the whole naming of the terrorist group ISIS. The name it ISIS, I was like horrified when it happened years ago, or ISIL was a better version of it. But that was such an overt agenda, not just the psyops in terms of it goes into multiple levels, because the same way with 9/11 are factions of our government that want to create these terrorist organizations or fund these extremist groups so that they can have an enemy to fight and then blame a larger place to then go to war with and take away more of our rights and create more police state mentalities and structures, etc. I had a friend who was in the military. He was in psyops at the time. He was out there in Qatar, and yet from the beginning of that whole thing, and he goes, "Oh, it's a complete joke." He goes, "Half of the Army psyops doesn't know what's going on, and the other half are involved in creating this ISIL organization and filming fake beheadings that were going on in the early videos that were being done by U.S. PSYOP teams." And he goes, "Look at their boots. They're all wearing U.S.-made boots, combat boots." And he said he tracked 1,000 anti-tank missiles that were a sale from the U.S. approved by Congress to Saudi Arabia, and then Saudi Arabia funneled it to Qatar, because Qatar is just a giant U.S. base pretty much, and they funneled it out to create the ISIL organization, so that they could try to contain Putin originally by popping up Islamic extremist states all around the former Russian countries was their goal, which is why also Putin went to Syria first to try to head it off. But that's a whole side story. But the fact that we have this thing going on where you have, he goes, they were just hiring criminal gangs and making them part of that ISIL organization, but on the metaphysical level, the fact that he tried to choose ISIS name was a spit in the face of the divine feminine, because Isis is one of the most purest names of the divine goddess energy. And in the Egyptian system, she's connected to Venus, to Sirius A, and the Pleiades. And as Isis Hathor, where she wears that moon disc, or so to speak, and the horns of the cow mother, Taurus, because Pleiades is in Taurus constellation, and the 7 Hathors, who are aspects of the divine mother, aspect of Isis that gave birth to Horus, divine sunchild, they're part of a larger civilization of galactic priestesses that live in the Pleiades, and they have these beautiful temples and these nebulas and the higher planets, where they do radiate out this kind of what they call like a galactic womb, kind of galactic. I call it, well, the way they phrase it is a little different. It's like the idea of a star heart, which is a concept we use a lot in the meditations. It's a term that has to do with the evolution of the heart chakra, where we're able to connect more and learn how to receive more love from other parts of the universe that we've been segregated from. And one of the ways it shows up is like as like a diamond around the auric body, or you can receive rays of light from the different triangle facets of the diamond into your heart chakra, so that because half the work is us deconditioning our blockages to knowing we're loved by so many more beings than we have realized throughout the galaxy and the universe. And so they're trying to help us remember that we're loved from all these different angles that we haven't even conceived of yet. So of course they want to then throw that negative ultimate shadow set like vibration of a terror scoop and name it Isis. And at the time I had clients, I was working with different women that had reincarnated from the Pleiades and were connected to that higher Isis Hathor order, and they were all getting massive attacks, and because that energy was being simultaneously launched to try to block women's crown chakras that had the Pleiadian connection, literally knocking off the crown of Isis Hathor to try to like create this inversion of like sequestering and violating the goddess again, by the bastardization of her name and associating it with the most horrible organization. So you get these subtle multi-layers going on where there's been a war in consciousness against positive symbols and symbols that connect us to lineages off-world that we really need more help from to help us evolve, that they try to sidetrack, and corral us and then replace it with negative substitutions, and false identity markers and, twisting the gender relationships like the Baphomet symbol, and so that we're not even aware, that androgyny is different than like fake neutrality or like twisted Frankenstein version of male-female. Is different than like pure androgyny, and unity. But anyway, that's a whole other side note. But I think you get the idea of what I'm saying.
I do, and Iron Bear pointed out something interesting, and it's kind of going along the same lines of with the divine feminine, is with the disclosure coming about, we all are focusing on like, aliens and all the star beings out there and everything, but we're missing that religion is even undergoing a disclosure movement. And he brought up, Mary Magdalene is now big in the church and
Oh, really?
no longer thought of as the prostitute. And they're like, no, she's, it's been venerated. And they're like, yeah, they actually, I think they've even come out and said like, yeah, there was no proof of that, and she walked with the apostles. She was
Yes.
with them and was like his right hand. And I've read where she was actually the first apostle and was funding all their travels. And so she was not this low class person, that she was like really the upper class. And so even she is getting venerated, and the church is bringing back the feminine energy, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear, especially because some of the biggest corruption is happening in the Vatican. I mean, some of the darkest satanic forces and negativity alliances is happening in the portions of the Vatican and Italy. So they're seeing horrible things that some of those popes and some of those bishops are doing with the technology and with defense contractors and Italian Illuminati bloodlines that are part of the Roman Empire extension, that are the real forces behind some of the Jesuit families and Black Pope and what they call the Gray Pope, that are behind the official White Pope that we see. So there's a whole deeper esoteric history that's been involved there with them trying to control and distort the story of Christ consciousness and Mary and the whole evolution ascension process with their projections and distortions. And because so many of the churches and cathedrals I've been to, especially when I was in Europe, you find some of them are just like, wow, like some are so beautiful and powerful, other ones are so disgusting because there would be symbols and structures that really try to block that Mary energy and like confine the goddess energy, because they want to usurp that energy and authority of the mother to represent the body of their church, which is so far out of alignment with the original Christ love teachings to begin with, from what I see. And Mary Mother for me is also part of the full moon archetype of the moon goddess, and Mary Magdalene connects to the crescent moon, which would be like the virgin goddess aspect, and virgin we're not, just like in the Greek days, Vesta, Hestia, or the virgin. It was more, not that if there were more original sex priestesses that understood the power of Tantra and working with like the sacred sex prostitute archetype that got bastardized later on by Rome and degraded, but they were a much higher class of trying to help people commune with the divine feminine through honoring the erotic aspect of the body along with the spiritual connection. So it was a much different level of sharing that was honored before it got into the lower shadow version of it. But as a principle, so like having that, and with the new moon is more of the grandmother energy of the crone, but just those two alone, Mary Mother, and Mary Magdalene have that full moon and to me, the crescent moon aspects of at least 2 or 3 ideas of it, and the Holy Grail symbol with the divine feminine as well, and the womb chakra, that being passed on later on to different cultures. So there, and again, it's because that's why Egyptians, also the Coptic Christians, found it so easy to connect with Christianity, because they saw Mary as an extension of Isis symbolism, because part of the Isis energy also comes from Sirius. For me, the original Mary energy also, she was a star seed, and that energy was coming from Sirius A, as was the Yeshua, or Christ energy. He was really a star seed from Sirius A. And so there are different teachers that came in from the different star systems that were trying to open up pathways of consciousness evolution for us, right? And that got attacked and reversed and inverted, by the opposition groups.
And what's funny about the church that I find is one of the funniest things, is we were talking about recently, is how the church is anti-alien, anti-star beings, all these things for the longest time. And yet, and their stance is like hybrids don't exist, that's science fiction and everything. And I was talking with some guests, and we were looking at Jesus, and we said, here's a kid that's born to a human and an angel / God, so to speak. So he would be a hybrid. So they're worshiping a hybrid on a cross, but yet they're like, nope, hybrids are science fiction. It's like, wait a minute, you guys are worshiping one. And it's like, and we all started wondering, was Jesus the first hybrid that was
Funny.
public and everything? And it's like, and it paints a whole new picture to the religion. And I mean, religion has undergone too, and like another story with religion is the story of the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve are the only 2 humans in existence, and Eve is from Adam's rib. So that's a really interesting twist there. But then they go, well, they had 2 sons, Cain and Abel, who married women from other tribes. And it's like, whoa, wait, hold on. Who are these other tribes?
Exactly.
And how did and for centuries, nobody go and say, wait a second, if these 2 were the original only people on the planet, how are there other tribes on the planet?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. A direct reference to genetic experimentations and, like you said, breeding programs or hybrid programs that were going on, and early genetic interventions that were done by different ET groups, positive and negative, to help humanity either rise up in a good way or make inroads to influence us in a negative way. We've had both types of genetic projects going on since the dawn, really, especially since Atlantis. Not so much really since Lemuria, but post-Atlantis for sure, where a lot of those dark family lines and negative ET lines started anchoring themselves first. And you mentioned before too, I mean, also with the church trying to keep, Jesus' image on the cross as opposed to the ascension is also part of that inversion idea, because they're trying to reinforce the lower side of Pisces, which Jesus or Yeshua was a messenger at the beginning of the age of Pisces, the astronomical age, precession equinoxes when we first went into that. And as all the fish symbolism, of course, involving in that, and the creativity, but the lower aspect of the martyr got really de-emphasized by too much by church. So we're going to keep people stuck on the cross of the 4 directions, so that we're sacrificing ourselves to the earth, even though saying we need to because he made the sacrifice for us. But they have that archetype so anchored of the pre-ascension idea that creates that disconnect and this kind of like punishment energy of guilt that they try to loop people into instead of forgiveness and love, which are his key messages. They end up making all the rules to make us feel guilty of being in a body and guilty of having pleasure, and how they disconnect their own priesthood from not being able to have relations, and yet they end up having distorted, pedophilia partly because they're suppressing their natural tendencies to have natural relationships, and they have darker groups that infiltrated it that wanted to use that destruction of the innocent child archetype as a further offering to their dark lord, which is not the real Yeshua, but the opposite. They're working more with the Set group, Negative Serpent ET group, Apophis group, Amun, the Black Sun group. They've worked with several different negative ET groups, unfortunately, to try to perpetuate a shadow aspect of Christianity instead of the evolved part of Christianity. And part of that goes back to, okay, we need to reevaluate our relationship, like the Native Americans and indigenous tribes, to the four directions, to the cross of matter and the circle of spirit, or the wheel of time, so that we're not just bound to it as a prisoner or a martyr being sacrificed by competing elements of air, earth, water, fire fighting against us, but that they're supposed to be a cornerstone, and like the Egyptian system, a foundation for the phoenix to rise, for the true phoenix rebirth of the new earth. And so it gets deeper into, again, playing with symbols and how they use symbols to either control people or help people evolve, and that the war of consciousness starts with the control of symbols and the interpretation of those symbols. So it's a big part of the early information warfare ops that have gone on, and still goes on, in different ways now too. More
it is, and we're actually approaching the hour. Are you okay to go a little bit longer, or
sure,
do you need to go?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. We're on a roll here, so.
We are, and I can't help wondering, with the church coming out and changing its stances on a lot of things, do you feel like it's a little too late, and the damage is done, and they're going down no matter what? They're beyond redemption.
Yeah, honestly, we even did some recent work, group work. It's kind of a longer story, but there's certain artifacts that were carried down from very, very way back from Atlantis days that were created by certain groups, off-worlders that came here, and and these objects are power. Let's put it that way. We'll go deeper, and that's a whole other storyline to go into arc-wise. But the Vatican, of course, has hoarded treasures for centuries, right? You've had so many things going on with that. Of course, the Illuminati groups have done the same thing and kept, trying to puppeteer these power artifacts, awful objects, other artifacts that were powerful ancient techniques, technology, and magic, and esoteric understanding of reality and nature of consciousness. But the problem is that there's one of the defense contractors, the Italian defense contractor, Leonardo, similar to our Lockheed Martin, and Boeing, and Northrop Grumman. They're connected to the secret space program on a larger scale too, and they're working with negative ET groups, unfortunately, just like ours are as well. And one of the groups they're working with is the Apophis or APEP group, who's the negative serpent god from Egypt, who is really the leader of the serpent ET humanoids, like the reptilians, but he's not lizard humanoids, it's snake humanoids, like the Nagas from the Hindu system. But there's even, I remember seeing stuff in the Vatican where you have that, people show images that look like a giant serpent's head. I can't remember by St. Peter's Square, but there's a whole thing going on where they, that this dark serpent symbolism is prevalent there as well, which is a hint towards the fact that they're really working. Some people there are working with the negative serpent ET groups. Speaking of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, taking it to a whole different level, and because that Apophis APEP group has also been involved in reading projects and trying to create more linkage here. So this Leonardo group, we had seen a few bishops and cardinals that were working with dark technology and ritual technology at the facility in Italy that Leonardo was hosting. It's Apophis group technology there. So, and even the previous Pope before this, there was stuff we had engaged with him on a higher level, and we were doing some counter work because he was directly working with Set, who was a negative Orion Empire leader, and opening up portals in the Vatican there to him, to Set group, and another group from the Southern Cross constellation. Speaking about cross symbolism, you get deeper into like the Northern Cross star, that and the Southern Cross constellation that also is connected to the winter and summer solstices. But in the Southern Cross constellation, there are some really disgusting negative ET groups that have been involved in a lot of distortion. And one of the groups there works with the Beelzebub energy, or the Beelzebub archetype or demon, Lord of the Flies. But he's really, that being is really part of a demonic malware that comes from a negative ET group in the Southern Cross system that's humanoid. But people have to understand that each planet has their own group of angels, and the planets that are negative have their own version, darker versions of demonic elements. So there is a cross-pollinating that occurs between positive and negative ET planets when they try to influence worlds such as the Earth, that involves an introduction from their planetary streams, those presences of either positive beings of light or negative beings, and has to do with the quantum makeup of that planet and its consciousness field that supports either side. So there have been literally demon energies brought from other alien negative worlds to the Earth as part of the pre-conquest tools by the negative ET groups to try to infiltrate our collective consciousness, use it like a malware symbol to invert like the tree of life into the tree of death, which is what a lot of these negative occult groups use to use in their dark magic techniques. They because the dark always tries to invert what the creator of light and love has made. So they always try to create a false image of something, invert it, just like inverting the pentagram, inverting the cross, inverting the tree of life into the tree of death. It's similar tactics. You see this all the time. Black sun discs instead of golden ones, inverting the sun energy, moon energy. It's so repetitive, but it works, for them. But and so this Baphomet energy, Beelzebub energy from Southern Cross is also, I've seen working with multiple my labs that were connected directly to these programs. One of which, one guy I worked on, he was a my lab SSP guy who was escorting some of these Vatican officials to go to this homeworld of the Southern Cross Beelzebub group because they were working closely with them, and that Southern Cross group was part of the perpetuating of the shadow aspect, almost like an energetic virus that they put in Christianity to try to lead people to the false cross, the Antichrist cross, or the inverted idea, instead of the ascension. So it gets really deep in terms of these levels of like engagement. So when you see that for them, the theater of operations is not just, like you said, disclosure of physical ETs or even higher dimensional, but it's understanding its ramifications on religion and on spirituality and our interpretation of our and awareness of our connection to the universe and our identity of being part of the creator and a subset of the one infinite creator, as opposed to just something that's separate from us. And this thing, healing that disconnect starts with our earth and our awareness of our sacred body that we're in, and this love energy that the earth wants to give us is evolving and is coming up. And that's something I want to mention before we go to. There's longer story. There are 7 locations that was being shown globally. They're going to be the first doorways for this new cone of love and light. Think of like the cornucopia symbol of abundance coming from Gaia's core. It's going to be shooting out starting in early May, especially April. We'll start feeling some of the waves coming up. One of the locations is in part of the Philippines, which is where I'm going to be at, and the semi-loosely working with some people, and I'm inviting people to come out who want to meet me out there to do some of the grid work in some beautiful locations, and also enjoy some beautiful beach time, as well as spiritual work, and enjoying everything together in that sense, right? And there will be some more earthquakes, some more volcanic activity leading up to this, because Gaia is going to be going her chiropractic adjustment to make more room for these new energies to come out. Like I said in the beginning, there are some dark groups that are trying to mess with this at other locations, including one in the Midwest, which is in Nebraska, which is going to be also one of these 7 global Phoenix hotspots, let's call it that the energy coming out. And there's a lot of groups, defense contractors, that are trying to really mess with it. And so we need to do work on a group level to send divine intervention there February, March, April, so we can get ahead of that. Because if they try to block these other powerful vortexes, they can create a lot of geological instability if they're successsul. So we really need to be like, no, we see ourselves as like custodians of like this new light and love emergence. When you really connect to your higher identity, you can be, you can step into deeper roles of service to help that process. So for me, it's like, okay, wait a minute, we're like the guards at the gate of Gaia's castle. We've got to open up the right drawbridge gate so that the positive ET troops of Andromeda and, Jupiter, Saturn, Pleiades, Arcturus, so many of them want to come in to help us. So this is what we kind of do in group work all the time. And but we need to do bigger stuff with that coming up, because this is a real critical nexus point in spring and fall of this year for those new energies. In the fall, October, I'll be the group out to St. Martin in the Caribbean, which is going to be another point of activation of the energies. There's one in the Bahamas that's also going to get activated in the middle of May as part of the 7 Phoenix locations. There's a spot in Paraguay, northern England. One in Israel, that's Mount Media. It looks like a Sedona mountain. That's one of the other Phoenix vortexes going to be kickstarted. And you see stuff going in Israel that's been going on that's quite dark. That's also the opposite of the true sun energy, inverting all that light energy there of the tree of life in the center of the religions to create, sacrificing Palestinians, creating so much death and destruction there, harnessing that energy for negative ET groups. So that goes, whenever you see a major theater of war and death there are negative beings that feed off that, and they try to create darker systems of control, darker gateways, and inverting the natural light that wants to come into the area. So it gets deep in terms of seeing not just the political BS propaganda stuff we hear about for rational, for different decisions going on, but it's deeper. Alliances have been made by these secret space program groups and multiple governments with these dark beings that are not just physical, but like you said, are working on some of the lower astral levels and demonic levels to perpetuate a negative timeline that they want to create. And so we have to do the opposite. We say, no, we're here to work with the angelic light beings and the positive galactic beings, so in divine feminine, like, no, we're going to birth the new reality, the new earth that's consecrated in love, and that true resurrection path gets cleared out of all the debris that keeps trying to clog up our own perception. So anyway, yeah, that was a little bit of a mouthful there, but that's, I think it kind of sums it up in a way.
No, and what I find interesting as we're clarifying all this and bringing awareness to it all, I've been starting to hear talks of, people who are in the religion and that are saying, oh, it wasn't Jesus now that died on the cross. It was his twin brother. And I've read in one place where like the name James popped into my head, and other places where it's Thomas is
Oh
who's
wow.
named as his twin. And so I'm curious, with all of your travels and all your studies where you've gone into the deeper end of everything, have you ever heard about Jesus being a twin and that's how they got him out and to keep doing his mission?
No, I've not heard about him being a twin. I mean, definitely, I've not heard about that one. I mean, there's other aspects of, going back to the original topic we talked about with the sun work. That Jesus was originally part of the Essene Order of the Essenes, right back then. The Jews were, there were the Sadducees, the Pharisees that are mentioned in the Bible, and the Essenes. And the Essenes were the most metaphysical of the Jewish sect at the time, and they were kind of like the hippies back then. And they were very big into, like, they were vegetarian. They were into the Tree of Life, Kabbalah studies. They did a lot of sun meditations. They were into nature. They were, they had a healthier lifestyle, so it was very different than other Jewish sects back then. So the fact that Jesus was part of that and disciples were as well, you have to understand that that's the precursor foundation. And that he'd also went, during his training years, his missing years in the Bible, when he went to India and also went to Egypt and learned about ancient mystery school teachings and solar teachings and yoga. And later on, but as it post his ascension, that he was seen in India, studying with some people that were connected to the god energy of Vishnu, that he became like a guru of Vishnu. A lot of cool stories. And someone I met who was in India, whose family was a guardian. They were stewards of one of the cemeteries of one of the disciples that also went to India, and they were protecting his gravesite for millennia now, some centuries, I mean, right? And so there's a lot of other cultural perception, but they have storylines of what happened with disciples, post that time period, and also with Mary and Jesus having children that were in France and in the Cathars and people in southern France that started that original positive secret societies that are part of like the Merovingian bloodline and Christ bloodline that had spread, and then that was of course inverted by negative Illuminati family bloodlines that wanted to take down the positive royal family lineages and replace them with dark lineages and negative hybrid ET influences, so they could control the destiny of humanity instead of having it be of love. They wanted to have negative reptilian and Sirius B and set DNA, Apophis DNA. It's also a longer story. There are multiple groups that have done that, in terms of the war of the nobles and trying to eliminate positive bloodlines and kinds of negative. It's all part of the same idea of like trying to manipulate the family tree and the genetics and the subconscious and collective through those symbols of the archetypes. Who are we putting in the positions of power that represent the king archetype or the queen archetype or the empress or the magician or the priest, high priestess. These are like archetypal offices, like in the tarot cards, and you have certain groups that the people that are labeled that are trying to usurp or be in an office of position where they want to wield power with that archetype. And that can be a very powerful and dangerous thing if it's in the wrong hands, because if they become the sublime symbol for that, for huge numbers of people that give them power by seeing them and honoring that position, then it also creates a limiting boundary, right, in the collective psyche, that we have to get through that thought form layer that's being co-generated by those individuals and their servants, that are giving us a watered down version of the archetype or a twisted version of it. So that's a whole other angle to see how we look at it too.
I have one last interesting question for you, and I feel like, really relevant for what's going on in the world right now.
Sure.
And I'm not wanting to focus on the political side of it. I'm looking at more of the planetary side of it, and that is, how do we know, because we're watching a movie unfolding, so to speak, how do we know which side of the movie to put our energy towards? Because we're constantly told, oh, this person is doing these great things, and then it's like a few weeks later, a few months later, oh, they totally are on the dark path, and we were wrong. And it's like, how do we know who and what to believe and put
I
our
mean,
energy towards? And now, with so many lies and so many secrets and so many things that are happening, it's like, I literally find myself every day, like, feel like I'm going through like an S curve where I'm like, I'm over here. Nope. Now I'm over here because of that. Nope. Now I'm back over here because of that. So, what is your advice for people to put their energy in the right space?
well, I mean, it's a combination. One, I would say don't overly indulge in some of these areas to begin with, because that's part of the mindset of separation and division that's been so much fostered between the left and right, and our by groups that control both sides oftentimes. And they call it like the Hegelian dialectic, or the problem reaction solution methodology, that our governments and military groups and deep state and Illuminati groups love to use, that where they want to create control opposition and fake solutions to put people towards a third solution that we would never normally think of if we didn't have that crisis to begin with, or that sense of hero or like villain. Not that there isn't actual hero and villains, but it's more complicated, because there's like 50 shades of gray in between the hero and the villain when it comes to politics.
Right.
and the ability to detach from the rhetoric of what's being professed by the mainstream narrative is also obviously critical, because there has been so much censorship and so much polarization on both sides of the fence about each other. Policies speak louder than words in that sense, right? At the same time, looking at the heart level, looking at the clear third eye level. I mean, there are certain things with the current administration, obviously, which is very new. Like with any politician, they have their light and shadow, and we have to hold any politician that's in power accountable for shit that we don't like, that's not good. We can't just be blindly subservient to your preconceived concept of what they're supposed to represent to us, or what we're told to represent to us, right? We have to have discernment and really have the lens of scrutiny be put upon all these people in power consistently, to keep them on track and call them out when they're not being on track. Irregardless of they're being beautiful in one area, but they may be evil in another area. That's usually how it works anyway. Where you can be passing one positive policy that affects a lot of people in a good way, then you do something stupid the next week. That's like, what are you doing? Because there's so many special interest groups, lobbyists. The power of the deep state tentacles runs deep. And so there are things I think that Trump is going to do that's going to serve both sides of the fence in order for him to even get to this position. To me, there was concessions that had to be made in order to even get to that point, and some of those concessions we're not going to like necessarily. Like with this pushing for this 500 billion AI thing infrastructure is definitely not something good. But then him having RFK as the head of health and human services is a fantastic thing. Go after big pharma, expose the corruption, with the chemical poisoning of humanity, and that's huge, right? There's esoteric, energetically scanning him beforehand. The first assassination attempt was definitely, he pissed off the deep state, and there was a group connected to Amun, who was Amun was a negative sun god in Egypt, or a negative god, and wanted to become the sun god. He tried to put himself as Amun Ra later, which is really his name means hidden. But Amun is a negative fifth dimensional group from Cancer constellation. They're very similar to the Set group in Orion. They're a part of this Order of the Black Sun from the Egyptian stance. What I had tracked psychically, tracking was that there was a group in the DIA, right, the Defense Intelligence Agency, that's part of the SSP group. They are working with the Amun group, which is also parallel, because Netanyahu and part of his Israeli secret space work, and they're working with the Amun group as well, and also the two of the negative ones. And so this whole return of the Black Sun cults, as we get into new solar energy, trying to help the Earth evolve, these Black Sun groups are trying to wield more power to invert it again in different areas. And just like the Nazis have their black sun symbol. The negative Nordic ETs have it, the Egyptians have it. It's spread all around. So what they shown was that the DIA was trying to get some new tech from the Amun group, and the Amun group said, we want you to kill Trump as a testament of your loyalty to us and to prove your value. Because what they shown was that there was a timeline where someone around Trump in the administration or something he's going to do, or someone in the administration is going to be a counterforce positively against negative alien invasion timeline. And so from that point of view, just that string alone to me was like, okay, that's good, because the opposite was the case with the Harris group and the deep state, that they were pushing for the China invasion and also for the negative alien invasion timeline to ground much more quickly. So irregardless of all the other crap that we don't like about Trump is doing, from the top view down, this part of it to me is essential. We have to start with a candidate that doesn't support negative alien invasions, then we can work on a more grounded level. So I kind of look at it from a whole different lens from that point down. And I'd seen that the DIA was using a technology that I'd encountered years ago. They call partial walking technology, where they can activate certain points on the person's back that have to do with our relationship to time. And that guy they used that had shot Trump in the ear, he was a 100% patsy. They literally knocked his consciousness out of his body, had an agent that was out of body walk into him like an avatar style, co-opt him and be the shooter. So as a per, that's why you couldn't find anything about his manifestos or history. It wouldn't make sense in his motivations, because it was a perfect test of that technology. So that's a whole bigger kind of side note story, but so that's something we have to be aware of, right? And in the criminalization of the cartels in Mexico, to me, is a great thing, because these cartels are out of control. I've had other friends in Border Patrol and Homeland Security that have told me horror stories of caches of bodies being found last year in New Mexico from women and children that were being massacred by the cartels for human trafficking, and the huge human trafficking operations that started during Biden. I've heard time and time again from people on the inside about it. So that's very real. So Trump may be going to the other extreme, but with the immigration policy now, I think if he just sticks to getting rid of the criminals, that would be good. But if he takes it further than that, then he goes into problems. So it's like you have to kind of see where is the theater of distraction occurring, what's the actual manifestation going to be, because there's rhetoric on one side, and then there's actual action that may be different than the rhetoric. So that's why we have to be really careful and seeing as it goes along, especially in the next few months, several months, what's going to happen is going to be interesting. I'm curious too, exactly which group is going to support. So again, there's many layers to looking at foreign policy and domestic, and also distraction, where they may say one thing but they're doing another, and but this is what we need to have push out as more disclosure, because I'm tired of all this theater of distraction, right? Like News Nation put out wonderful video recently that I didn't finish watching, on 2 new whistleblowers that were special ops that were part of the alien retrieval team, and they start talking about psionic assets working for the government, this secret space program, and which are basically like psychics that can call down the spaceships. I'm like, yes, this is what we're doing anyway with a group. Or we had ships come down in Montauk back in 2011. I did the group work out there. We had 7 ships that were like only about 100 feet above the ground that flew over us during our activation. We were like all in shock. But these things are here, they're happening by light and dark groups, and it's a matter of like, okay, who are we? When we realize we have that connection, then it's important that we claim our authority in a higher level to give support, to help others. And so it starts with that, being of service first, whatever we're doing, and don't get overly distracted by what's going on in the puppet shows. And at the same time, standing up and expressing concern when it's relevant, because it's very easy to fall down into all these different sidetracks and lose track with your own center, because it's going back into your own heart and your own mission and your own love energy. That's important, essential to be evolved, so that the more we're accountable for our own shadow and heal our own inner shadow, then the more we can be a source of light and truth that can help others do the same. And that's part of how that spark of love's flame spreads, that phoenix fire builds to create that and that awareness catalyst or expansion. That's a whole other zigzag there, but
Well, with the last 10 minutes, there's something about what you do that I feel like needs to be shared and needs to be public, so to speak, in awareness. And with me being metaphysical background, it was something new to me. And I was like, when I heard you say it, it was like my mind went, well, duh, why didn't I think of that? Because that's so obvious. And what it is when we were doing our sessions, you would say, okay, we're going to cut cords with this group. And then you go, and we're going to cut cords with the contracts. And we're going to cut cords on this. And I was like, that was so foreign to me. Contracts. I was like, I'd never thought about contracts forming chords. And so that was when I heard that, I was like, man, it makes sense then why when we cut cords, it still is going on because we're not fully cutting the cords.
Contract, yes.
And so, how did you come about that? And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's very important.
I mean, this is also, this definitely dovetails into like a sub niche area that I found myself into the past few years. Because 3 years ago, that's when a lot of what governments made updated treaties with the negativity groups to give them more permission to manipulate our history, our timeline, and commodify people's energies. So since that point, every client I've seen daily has come in with energy cords and implants that have been funneling energy from them to different alien bases, and some defense contractor bases or military bases hosting the alien tech as well. And most of them are going to negative time gates, portals in these facilities that are open to alien invasion timelines by specific groups that are trying to create that manifestation here. But they need our own energy of co-creation to manifest it here, right? Attention follows intention, or other way around too. So and then they also want to increase the size of their inner plane broadcasting centers of these dark ET groups. Want to be able to influence people subconsciously, psychically. So they need our energy to strengthen their own structures on the astral plane so that they can radiate more of their crap, right? So it becomes a war of as above, so below, or as within, so without, where they keep trying to do combinations. And so what I've seen as part of that is that there's a certain subsection of light workers or star people that have had infiltration lives, where, say, if you're a Pleiadian or Andromedan and you're part of a positive military group fighting against negative ET groups, oftentimes they'll ask us, hey, do you want to volunteer next life to be a deep cover agent for light in a specific dark ET group, say the reptilians, for example, since that's a common one, or easy for people to recognize. And so there'll be an incarnation, say, at Lightworker we have as a colonel or lieutenant colonel or general in the reptilian armies, because they're trying to understand the methodology of that group, technology, tactics, bring light to remind idiots in the dark, hey, you don't have to be an asshole for all of eternity, you can go back to light when you want to be. And also because a lot of wars are fought through time, not just space, so we need to have agents of light placed strategically in these different theaters of operation across vast continuums, right? Spatially, temporally, multidimensionally. So part of what I find is that a lot of light workers or star people that have these lineages are getting attacked because they have these unresolved contracts and other symbols like malware, I call it, energetic malware, they inherited from that infiltration life when they were on the dark side. So the first people the negative ET groups are using to hack into are anyone with those unresolved contracts that they can then use that as a justification to put all sorts of technology, including cords, implants, modules in people's fields, because they're trying to stick it to us, or and it's like, oh, you still have this open with us, or artificially make it open when maybe it was closed to begin with. So that, to me, is part of what we do with you. Is important is to be able to heal some of these past life residue crossover streams, by a certain process we do, right, that we experience, and then feng shui that part of our psyche to connect with our positive galactic lineage that we originally came from before we volunteered and went to that dark life, so that they can come and help us enhance our medicine wheel to remember that we are part of this larger lineage of love and light that is here. And so, so then other groups take advantage of that too. Again, dark magicians, other people, they always look for weaknesses in the auric field to try to put something in there to hack into someone's. So the more we're accountable for realizing, hey, where have we given our power away, or where have we invested our energy that needs to be reinvested in ourselves and delineated from these previous dark paths we may have been on, and to have that forgiveness and self-acceptance and love, so we're not overly judging it either. It helps us transcend duality when we have some of those lifetimes, because it builds a space of compassion where we understand how some of these people went that far down the rabbit hole in a negative way, so that we don't become overly self-righteous and overly judging them, but be able to build a bridge of empathy and at the same time healthy boundaries, so that we're not getting infringed on either, so it can go both ways. So that was a process of just my own self-development, because there were other things going on where contracts even were looping themselves, and we discovered that there were these time pipelines that certain people had that were being created by other negative ET groups that were trying to distort the simultaneity principle of time and trying to link people up to those negative lives in a way that was not natural, so that it was still acting like it was happening now. And so we had to have a process for a year. A lot of people just disconnect these other structures and call on other good guys to kick out those groups, so that, because that was such a gross violation happening. So it can get pretty complex with these layers of craziness that for me is like a norm at this point, but then also, subset of people like My Labs, SSP, may have contracts with defense contractors, intel agencies, because we've been traumatized and abused by these groups, and they forced us into these signatures. But then we need to heal those alter personas or parts of our unconscious that still were deferring to these idiots and giving them, that. And I've had agents, on Dream Plane try to make me somebody sign contracts. I let go. I'm saying, no, I'm not signing a contract with you. But they literally try to do that in the Dream Plane and then use it as justification. Hey, you signed it to us in the astral plane. Remember? It's like, F you. That's so. Can't try to use part of my conscious and Dream Plane as a legal jurisdictional claim of freaking experimenting on me. It's like, F you, right?
Exactly. And
but this
one
is
of
what
the
they
things
do.
too is we talk about taking our power back and how easy it is, but we make it harder. That when working with you and when that comes up and stuff, it's like you have us just simply say, I no longer consent. You
Yeah.
no longer have my permission. And that's it. And it's like done. And I feel like that is such an important thing for people to realize. And yes, you have to believe it and you have to have intention behind it, but that is really the largest first step to take,
Yes. Yes.
is just stating that simple two sentences undoes so much. And it's like amazing how, we feel like, oh, we have to go through these long processes, have to
Oh,
do this heavy work. And it's like, no, it really starts with just stating and owning two sentences.
I mean, yeah, it's true, and especially because when that space when I'm working with people, that's why it's helpful to make that more impactful. It's you have to be I find it more effective to make sure your environment's properly charged, right? So with the work and calling in the angels in each direction, and I have a lot of crystals and candles that create a whole space remotely before I work with somebody. And so the idea there is also that the more I can hold space with that angelic vibration or positive galactic vibration with the person, then when we make those statements, it adds more potency to the statements in a faster way, than because there are times I just say to myself, I may not feel as impactful, but when I do the ritualistic ceremonial aspect of it, really create that chi energy in my body and call and really feel the angel presence more with me, then I'm coming from a higher stance of authority because I'm lining up with my higher self and I'm trying to bear witness with the client, his higher self, to help them remember that they have the authority to say no. And it's like we become like a spiritual lawyer team for the divine light judges, in the higher realms being, no, okay, now you guys can intervene and kick out these idiots, So there's a bit of a background context around that statement that adds more potency to it. But it definitely starts with that for sure, because you can't do anything if the person's still like, I want to be part of it. Well, then I'm not going to do for you nothing. So it's your free will that has to be recognized and reclaimed
Yeah.
in your own authority.
Well, yes. And so thank you for your time and thank you for sharing with us all of your adventures and knowledge. And
Definitely.
I feel like I need to state the obvious of we've only hit the tip of the iceberg, not even really even the tip, more like the little top point of what all is Steven. And it's like, wow, there's so much more. So if
Yeah.
ever you want to come back on the show, let me know.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely. Probably it'll probably get to do one show when I'm away in the Philippines to do some activation work. It'll be fun to channel some energy from Magic Love Island.
yeah,
It could be nice too.
if we can make it happen, I'll
Yeah, yeah,
definitely do that. And
definitely.
I was a part of earlier this month doing that one meditation deal, and that was really interesting to be a part of. And
Oh, with me,
every
yes, it's for, yeah, that was a powerful, yeah, yeah. It's a different
so
style. It's definitely interesting.
it is. So thank you for coming
Definitely.
on. And
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Michael. So it was fun too. Really good to share with
yes,
you.
you, before I close it out, do you have anything you got coming up that you
um,
want to promote out?
I mean, I'll be doing remote work session wise with clients while I'm away. I'm going to the Philippines really next week, literally, and I'll be gone till like June over there before I come back to New York, where I normally live out in Brooklyn. So I'll be doing group Zoom work and individual session work from out there. But for the time difference, so people will be a little bit of pain. But yeah, if people want to do any sessions, I guess I do that remotely. They're usually about an hour and a half or a little longer, depending on what people background is about, what we need to address. They can find me also on my YouTube channel, and my playlist tab. My YouTube channel has a bunch of interviews as well. I only have a couple of videos on Rumble. You'll probably find a couple on there, more on YouTube. You'll provide my contact info on my emails. Sidejumper, psijumper@gmail.com, psijumper, all in word. I'm on Facebook under my name. I use that more often. I'm on it relatively less on Instagram. I need to get back on it more. So email is probably the best way, or Facebook me, messenger me. I can send you my phone number, and I'll be on WhatsApp for people that have my phone number waiting for contact.
Okay, and
Yeah.
did I get the email correct?
Yes, you got it. Perfect. Yep, Sidejumper.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I'm the only one with my name on Facebook, on YouTube, anywhere in social media. I'm the only one there with that name, so hard not to find me if you search me. Although I am shot banned a lot of times, but more so for viewership, I should say.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah. Happy Chinese New Year's.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah,
and have a
happy New Year.
wonderful trip.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be in contact. Yeah. Awesome.
All right, and with that, we are going to say good night to everyone. So,
Blessings, everybody.
blessings to you all.